Hey everybody, how's it going? Thanks for joining me this afternoon. I am Auron MacIntyre. Before we get started today, I just want to remind you that one of the ways we keep the lights on around here is, of course, subscriptions to Blaze TV. And this is one of the best times for you to go ahead and support the show because if you head over to blazetv.com/Auron and use the Black Friday 40 promo code, you're going to get $40 off a 1-year subscription to Blaze TV. That's blazetv.com/Auron with the code Black Friday 40 to get $40 off your subscription today. All right, guys, we have a number of things going on. Unfortunately, some bad breaking news that we'll dig into in just a second. The main purpose of this stream is to discuss the natures of republics and empires and what the difference is. So, this is supposed to be more of a theory stream, more of a philosophy stream. But we have had several things happen simultaneously. So, I'm also going to be talking to you about Marjorie Taylor Greene and her kind of public Twitter crash out, which has created quite a firestorm. We're also looking at a developing story. This is breaking news right now, so forgive me. I have very limited details. However, it does look like 2 National Guardsmen were shot in Washington, D.C. There are a number of reports going around. Again, I'm sorry for the limited information, but this has literally happened 15 minutes before we went live. And from what we can tell, there have been 2 guardsmen shot. People are reporting other casualties, but I just don't know enough yet to confirm anything. A lot of people, of course, know that President Trump deployed the National Guard to Washington, D.C. to increase law and order there. Obviously, Washington, D.C. is a place that has been very dangerous for a very long time, a disgrace for America's capital to be that dangerous, the most powerful nation in the world, the what was supposed to be a beacon of freedom, and yet the nation's capital is dirty and dangerous. And President Trump said, enough of that. I'm sending in the National Guard. Obviously, we right now have no idea if this is a targeted terror attack. We know that we have seen multiple targeted terror attacks from Antifa and Antifa related groups on ICE agents and other government officials. Luckily, in the past, they have been largely unsuccessful, though only due to the inept nature of the assassins, as opposed to a lack of desire to murder Americans and American soldiers and American agents. Now, ultimately, we knew that this violence could continue to escalate. It had been quiet for a little while after the Trump administration cracked down on many of the ICE assaults, made more arrests, started arresting Antifa members that were linked in all capacities. They've declared Antifa a terrorist organization, an international terror organization, which gives them many different options. Now, again, we don't know. To make clear, there is no evidence one way or another whether this was just a criminal who was on a crime spree and the National Guard tried to step in as they are providing additional assistance there. If this is a targeted attack of some kind, a terrorist attack, we just don't know. There's just not enough information at this time. So if more information comes in on this attack as the show is ongoing, I'll do my best to bring it to you. But right now, all I can report is that there are these 2 National Guardsmen that appear to have been shot. Don't know the state of them. So take a moment, pray for them, pray for their families, pray for others that may have been wounded in this attack. And we will just have to wait and see what is coming up next. All right. So, like I said, the other piece of information, the other breaking news is the Marjorie Taylor Greene crash out. But honestly, I think I'm going to do that at the end because I would prefer that we get into kind of the theory section before we do the drama section. Don't get me wrong, the MTG crash out does have political significance, so it's not just Twitter drama. However, a little bit salacious. We'll get to it. We will, but ultimately, I would like to address the bigger issue, the issue that the video is actually named after, the stream is actually named after, before we dig into kind of her spiral there. All right. So let us take a look at the nature of empires. So I talk a lot about the forms of government because one of the issues we have, I think, when we look at the political situation is we don't consider the forms of government something that are embodied, that are actually meant to serve a purpose, a people, a situation. And we have been encouraged to see them as these abstract things that can just be dropped onto any given political arrangement, right? We just plug and play capitalism or democracy or socialism or monarchy or whatever it is. We just take our favorite political theory and it's the best one, right? It's like comparing scientific theories. You just measure them against each other, and if this one is correct more often, if it is closer to reality, then we drop the other model and we adopt that model of understanding the universe. Boom, objective reality, done, over, right? And it's not to say that there aren't objectively better or worse political systems, especially when we apply them to specific situations. But that's the issue. We don't use the context. We just say we can pick this up and drop it down on top of people. Now, we all know that has kind of proven to be ridiculous, right? There's been a general consensus that's been building, even among those who are really in the neoconservative camp, that wars in places like Afghanistan were a mistake, that the George W. Bush idea that you can just spread liberal democracy everywhere, it's delusional. It doesn't work. We've seen it fail over and over again. Now the neocons are coming up with other reasons to do these kind of wars. It's not a regime change war. It's a strike of geopolitical significance, whatever, whatever the line is. They ultimately come up with this idea as to, why it's okay to continue to engage in these foreign conflicts. But one of the reasons we've learned that you can't just drop liberal democracy on Afghanistan is that, well, peoples are different, cultures are different, human beings are different. They're not the same, they're not blank slates. And that means that the way they're governed needs to be tailored to those people. You can't just abstract it out, a general type of rule for everyone, and then apply it. There are no George Washingtons or Alexander Hamiltons or John Jays sitting in the caves of Afghanistan. It's just a fundamentally different society, and it must be governed a different way. And it's not just that people have limits. Government forms also have limits. They aren't universal. They aren't universal ideologies. They have to be situated in a specific instance to work. Now, the United States was founded as a republic, right? It's a republic if you can keep it. A lot of Republicans, a lot of conservatives like to point out that we're not a democracy, we're a republic. But if you ask them what the difference is, they can't tell you. They don't know. They'll say something like, oh, well, we have representative governments. Well, all democracies are representative governments at this point. There are no direct democracies in that sense. So you're just saying there is no difference between them. But actually, republics have a particular form. There's a particular thing that they do, and there are certain limitations on that form. And this is part of what Franklin was ultimately saying, that the republic will only be maintained if you live in a certain way, if you keep that republic. If you change the way you live, if you change the way that the country is constituted, then ultimately the Constitution we just wrote for you, the republic, will not last. And I think that we have, as a society, as an American empire, grown beyond what a republic can handle. And the fact that we refuse to look at this is a real problem. Now, this is not me arguing against republics. I think often republics are great. I think it would be ideal if we could return back to a virtuous republic. But that's going to make us make decisions, a number of decisions that a lot of people would not like. They would oppose. They would not like to see us have to scale back, say, forward adventurism or many other aspects of our current society. So I think they are opposed to the idea that we should limit ourselves in order to maintain the republic. But if we don't limit ourselves to maintain the republic, then we only have certain other choices, because empire has also its own specific way that it works. It has a reason that we are compelled towards an imperial model, just as there's a reason that people are compelled towards a republican model. And if you don't understand these different forms of government and why they exist and the way that they operate and the different interests that they serve, then you don't understand why the country is being pulled in two different directions. So that's really what I want to talk about today. Now, I've talked a lot about republics before, but I just want to provide a brief overview and maybe a few spruce up a few points so we have a basis for understanding where we started as opposed to where we're going. So in the classical form of a republic, you have a virtuous set of citizens capable of self-government through a shared set of beliefs, values, and customs. Okay, there's a reason that most of the time republics are birthed out of monarchies. So the Romans had a monarchy that eventually turned into a republic, that eventually turned into an empire. And the United States was birthed out of a monarchy, the UK, the English monarchy. It became a republic, and now it's trending towards empire. If you're seeing a pattern here, there's a good reason, right? Even if you look at something like Athens, right? It becomes this republic. It wants to be an empire. Like these desires are constantly moving through these forms of government. Now, in order to be a republic, the citizens need to be virtuous because you have to have, again, this self control. Citizenship in a republic is precious, it's limited, and it conveys as many responsibilities as it does rights. The citizens of a republic don't gain the right to vote simply because they're like located somewhere inside the nation. They just happen to walk in and raise their hand and whatever. No, these people have earned the right to be a part of the society, to have their say in the republic because they are constantly engaged with a body politic. Classically, in most republics, citizens were the soldiers. Yes, literally, service guaranteed citizenship. If you wanted to be respected as a citizen, you had to be able to contribute to the fighting capacity of the republic. And you also had the responsibility of often being a family man or a business owner or a active member of your religious community. You had to prove that you were willing to sacrifice on behalf of society, and you had the ability to contribute to it meaningfully. There was none of this, I just show up and vote myself the money. Everybody recognized that if you allowed Republic to go to that place, it would destroy itself. Every classic philosopher, every modern philosopher before the 1900s all knew that the minute the people had the ability to vote themselves money, that was basically the end of the process. So if you were going to have a society where people voted, where they had this popular sovereignty, only the people who were a net positive, who were contributing, who were going to lose something if you had the state start handing over money, they were the only people who were allowed to vote. That was what it was limited to. This is even true in the original American context, right? The vote is very narrow. It generally tends to be men of European descent, and most of which had to serve at some level in a militia. Not all of them, but a large number of them had involvement in, directly either combat or being ready to be pulled up if necessary to defend themselves in their community. They often served as the posse for the sheriff. You didn't usually have a police department. The men were involved if there was a sheriff or sometimes a constable, depending on the American tradition you're looking at. They often had to round up the men of the city because they were assumed they would be armed and ready to involve themselves in enforcing the law. So the idea is that constantly you had this desire and this requirement of men to be active in their community, to take their own well-being, the safety of the community into their own hands if they were going to be considered productive citizens. All right. So the reason that a republic is allowed to be self-governing is because, again, the people share a certain type of virtue. They all have an idea of what the good is. It's part of their folkway, it's part of their tradition, and the law is really just there to guide them along the tracks they already have laid down. So the law matters, but it's really more of an encouragement to stay on the track they've been going on as a society. It's not a radical reinvention. It's not a bunch of social engineering. It's kind of the way that they live. And this is why self-government is itself a kind of a misleading term, right? Because it conjures up this image of the autonomous individual, like this person who's just doing it on their own because they're so virtuous and they don't need anyone else. They don't need any contact society. They'd be the same as they were either way. But of course, that's not true. Aristotle told us that virtue is practiced in community, that as a political animal, man can only achieve his ends by being a part of a community in which he has specific roles and specific duties. So when we say there's self-government, what we really mean is it's community government. The community had enough social force and there's enough virtue in the individual to follow that social cue that the government rarely need to step in. The formal state rarely needs to step in and do anything on its own. From time to time, the civil magistrate might need to move things one way or another, but republics are self-governing in the sense that the government has this light touch because the community is constantly self reinforcing. Like I said, everyone from Aristotle to Machiavelli to the American founders, they believed that republics had to contain virtuous populations who held themselves to account. A more powerful central ruler, it just isn't necessary because the people are already strong. They already share the sense of identity and morals, and they don't need someone to teach it to them, to enforce it on them, to force something that's not natural to the community on everyone. Anyone who steps out of line with that shared custom in a republic, they're going to quickly be chastised by their fellow citizens. Authority and order, they exist, but it's the community that does the majority of the enforcement. Again, light touch by the civil magistrate when necessary. And so you have this deep shared sense of identity and virtue, and that's what binds a republic together. However, there are some downsides to this, right? Plenty of upsides. We can think of all the upsides: more liberty, a more ordered society, the ability to have more expression. People do not feel this artificial weight of tyranny upon them. Lots of fantastic things that come from republics, but there have to be some downsides. All these forms come with downsides. Okay, there's republics are great. Maybe the way you want to live. Maybe that's because that's the way your people live. That's natural to you. But we have to make sure we understand there are downsides. And for republics, the downside, one of the major ones, is they're rare throughout history for a reason, because they have a specific limitation: scale. Most successful republics have been city states. They're small, contained societies capable of maintaining that virtue and identity. But once a republic starts to expand, it's naturally going to include people who don't share the nation's culture at all. In The Prince, Machiavelli actually warns that if a ruler does want to expand, he wants to conquer outside, he should only conquer nations, other peoples, that share basically the same religion or language or heritage that his nation does, because that'll allow the new people to assimilate with the previous population. If you bring in a bunch of people with a different language, a different religion, a totally different heritage, your compatibility is going to be very low. And Machiavelli says basically you're going to either have to you're going to have to colonize this place, you're going to have to just destroy it. Like when you conquer people who are so radically unlike you and you try to incorporate them into your society, it's going to be very difficult to govern as any type of ruler, but especially as a republic, because the republic has to incorporate those people into the body politic unless it has a very, very, very clear definition of who a citizen is and who's not. And even then, it usually ends up shifting in favor of more democracy and including more people, even the people that hated you. And we, of course, have this problem now. We just have mass democracy. If you're here for 5 years, you're probably going to end up becoming a citizen and get to vote, right? I mean, you don't have to, but that's probably what's going to happen. That's why we're constantly pushing for all kinds of amnesty and all these things, because if you leave people in the country long enough, some politician is going to want to offer them power or enfranchisement so that they can get the reciprocal support and power that comes with buying those votes, importing those votes in. So you have to be very careful as a republic when you expand, because if you're bringing in a bunch of people from different cultures, different languages, you're going to start breaking down the very social fabric that makes your republic possible. So attempting to rule all these people who are very different, it's just fraught with all kinds of difficulty. And the more different you are from the people who are coming into your country, the less likely they are to bear the yoke of your culture correctly, which is why there's this really angry attack on American culture, because, well, people stopped feeling like they needed to assimilate to it. Instead, they kept telling Americans, you need to change, right? We've got these leaders in Minnesota yelling at American residents saying, well, no, you're an anti-Muslim bigot because you don't want your entire town to be taken over by Muslim calls to prayer. And we don't have to respect you, white guy. You don't belong in our society. And that's what they really mean. That's their society now. They conquered it and took it from you because you imported too many people who had a entirely different way of life. And guess what? They got to vote. So they started voting a bunch of people in that believe what they believe and look like they look and talk like they talk, because that's what people actually do. And so it's very dangerous for republics, especially with their mechanism of voting, especially if they've gone to a mass democracy where the citizenship means very little. It's extremely dangerous to bring in people of a different country, right? That just doesn't work very well. So this is a major problem with republics. They can be great, they can be amazing, but they do not scale well. They do not deal with expansion, bringing in a bunch of new people. It simply breaks down the system. Now, the good news is there are ways to govern multicultural societies, right? If you get a bunch of people together under a one state, one ruler, one leader, one government, but the people are so radically different. You've got all these different nations and all these different peoples together under that banner. There is a way to do this, and that way is called empire, right? So multicultural empires and kingdoms, or they're relying on kind of the emperor to be this binding agent, right? So in the republic, we're leaning on culture, we're leaning on shared values, we're leaning on virtue. But once we break apart into these constituent pieces, we have too many nations, too many peoples, too many religions, languages, ways of life, all under one government. Then there has to be a switch. There has to be a different way that you manage these different outcomes, because the people have become too different to have these conversations on, what do we really believe and what are our shared goals and how do we want to live our lives. Unfortunately, you have this situation where once you've lost that center, you simply can no longer continue in this single identity without a strong leader coming in and pulling things together. So you have this situation where the emperor is going to like start to bind things together. But to be fair, even in a classical imperial model, most wise rulers, they're going to allow the different parts of their empire to retain most of their character. I mean, you can try to force each nation to have exactly the same ideas and culture and everything, but it was in the past a foolish project, right? Instead, it was much smarter to let the different individual peoples, the different kingdoms, the nations that had made up your empire, it was better to kind of treat them with a light hand, just make sure that their people paid taxes and send troops to serve in the military. Usually you'd actually utilize local leaders. In some cases you'd even let the different nations keep their local king. And usually you'd kill off the last line and find some distant relative you controlled. But ultimately, as long as that guy, that proxy, whoever he was, whether it's just a local leader, chieftain, or a full-on king, they just always had to show deference to the emperor if they wanted to keep their head. But allowing that cultural continuity of, okay, here's someone who at least looks like you and speaks like you and has the same religion you do, that saved empires a lot of grief because they simply did not have the ability to go in and crush every single culture that was different. Now, if you do look, obviously, at different empires, there were times where they did that. Pretty famously, of course, and one that's very relevant today. The Jewish people were driven out of Israel, where they lived at that time, because they were so hostile to the Romans and their imposition on kind of Jewish religious practices and taxing and others, that ultimately they led this revolt that just made them ungovernable. The Romans had provided a large amount of allowances. They let them worship in ways they usually don't let other people worship. They let them keep certain rituals and different cultural contexts. Obviously, we know, if you've ever read the New Testament, that the Pharisees and other Jewish officials were constantly in conversation with Romans because the Romans left that architecture in place. However, when it just got too much, eventually the Romans said, you know what, that's enough. They ended up wiping out a lot of Jewish people. They destroyed the temple, the Jewish temple. They drove the Jews out from Israel. And so, again, most of the time you see what we saw at the beginning of the Bible, which is kind of the Romans trying to work with the Jewish people at some level, allow for their cultural practices, allow their leaders to stay in power. However, if a subject's people got too unruly, there would be this level of power. Ultimately, the emperor is wielding incredible power, right? There is a high level of authority. So a wise ruler at that time was very careful with how they deployed it, because while they had a lot of power, they could only exert so much of it in any given place in any given time. So it cost them something to crack down that brutally on a place like Israel. So they only did it when they thought there was some kind of last resort. Now, you might say to yourself, Auron, that's not what we do today. Even when we have these empires today, it seems as like, especially the American empire, is one that ultimately allows for almost no difference between the different peoples. Everyone has to live together. Everyone has to go to school together. Everyone has to share the same identity. We don't, in theory. I mean, obviously it depends on which group you belong to as to how much of your identity you're allowed to retain. But in general, we want the culture to homogenize. We want everyone to kind of be in the same place. America has actually had several different attempts to, whether it be the Germans or the Native American Indians or other groups, to kind of forcibly integrate them into society, make their children go to school, make them Christianize, make them Anglinize, right? These are all things that we have seen throughout the American experience because we wanted to form one people, one nation. And so the American experience was one where initially we had the level of federalism that allowed for some kind of uh, identity differences, but over time, especially post the Civil War, it became critical for the central government to wield more power because they needed to control the South. So you had the scenario where you couldn't let the states do what they wanted, you couldn't let people live in different ways, and so that only became more and more powerful over time. Now we look at most liberal democracies, including America, and they seem more like empires that are trying to force everyone into their same kind of cookie cutter than anything else. And that's because we have technology that the Romans and other famous imperial powers simply did not have, right? We have propaganda machines, we have television, we have the internet, we have radio, we have aircraft that allow the 82nd Airborne to be outside your door in a few hours. You can deploy a massive amount of troops anywhere in the United States if you really want to, rather quickly. And so this changes the relationship of the central government and tyranny because before, while maybe the emperor might have wanted a uniform culture, would have been easier for him if he had that ability, it simply was not available. There was not enough government infrastructure. They could not uphold the different tenets that they wanted to through force. So they had to allow a certain level of subsidiarity, a certain level of local control in order to maintain. They did not have the capacity. The state was not total. They could not provide everything that churches and families and communities were providing, and so they had to allow for a certain level of autonomy even inside their empire in order to make it work. However, today we don't have to do that so much, right? We have these tools. We have the level of surveillance. We have the level of communication. We have the level of firepower. We have the level of mobility. And this just allows these different governments to respond immediately to any wrong thing, right? This is why we have the number of hate speech laws and civil rights laws and everything else, because we don't want any region of the country to think differently or act differently. Everyone has to behave the same, and we will deploy the military. We'll send in the FBI. We'll cut your bank account. We'll do whatever we need to do, and you can do it from Washington D.C. in a few hours by hitting a few buttons or launching a plane or two. In a way that you just simply could not do that when Diocletian was trying to figure out what to do with the Roman Empire and just ended up dividing it instead. So this development technology, along with kind of just the shift that we're undergoing, has a lot of people confused about why leaders of like modern liberal democracies are importing so many foreigners, even though the voters hate the idea, right? Like if you look at across the board, even on the left, up until just a little bit ago, mass immigration, deeply, deeply unpopular. To this day, still, even on the left, it's unpopular comparatively, but it used to be wildly unpopular, right? And yet both parties constantly doing it. When the Republicans are in power, it's more legal immigration. When the Democrats are in power, it's more illegal immigration. But immigration, immigration, immigration all the time, even though it's deeply unpopular. Even Donald Trump will start talking about, off one side of his mouth about how we need all these H-1B workers because Americans can't do the job, even though he knows his base absolutely hates these answers. So why are they doing it, right? Like, why do we keep seeing these leaders of what are supposed to be democratic states that respond to popular opinion, popular sovereignty, ruled by the people? They're republics, right? Virtuous republics being ruled by their people, right? Why are they doing this? Why are they importing another class of people when they know it's deeply unpopular with the people they're supposed to serve? Well, there's several answers. One, of course, is just the cheap labor. It makes the right people just too rich. Same problem again with Rome. We can look at the importation of slaves by the optimates and their desire to own large chunks of land, locking other people out of land, using slave labor to undercut their wages. All of these things sound familiar to you because they're all happening to you. There's nothing new under the sun. Another is, of course, the ability to import voters that are loyal to you. I've talked about this many times. Liberal democracy is a comically easy system to hack. Ultimately, you just import a new voting base, and they are the ones that keep you in power, and you no longer have to serve the entrenched interests of the people who actually live in your society. You gain more power because your voting base is entirely dependent on you for fitting in, keeping their voting rights, gaining any kind of economic foothold or status inside society. So that's an obvious one as well. But the final piece of the puzzle is just raw power. Because the differences created by importing so many different cultures into one country, they are destabilizing. And, Tucker Carlson asked me this when I was on a show. Why do you want to destabilize your own country? Why would our leaders want to stabilize their own country? And I gave him, the other answers, but this one is important too. And I don't think I mentioned at the time, and I should have, because this is really critical. It also provides a infinite excuse for government authority. Now, you don't want to make your your civilization so unstable that it completely comes apart. But the more unstable you make it, the more reliant people are on the government to provide order. And the governments of liberal democracies, well, they understand that there's only so much power they can demand in a system that is stable and is designed to limit their ability to exercise power through constitutional government and democratic feedback. So what do? Well, you create a society so diverse that there's no shared understanding of how people should conduct themselves. How do we act in a store? What is private property? Do we respect it? Is violence an acceptable answer? Do you escalate into a conflict immediately upon bumping into someone or smudging their Puma, right? These are all questions that are not decided by any kind of objective ideology. They're decided by culture and values and traditions. They're decided by the collective understanding of the people. And if that collective understanding is mainly Anglo and Christian, then the answer to these questions will be very different than if the collective understanding is, say, Arab and Muslim, right? These are going to be very different answers to the same questions. And they'll be right in those societies, but they will be wrong when those societies exist in a mutual space. And so if you create this destabilization by bringing in a large number of people, then guess what? You can create more authority for yourself, even though you're technically still governing a liberal democracy or a republic. So multicultural societies, they tend towards authoritarianism because it's the only way you can manage the level of difference and diversity that exists inside of them. It's particularly true when a multicultural society tries to integrate people who live inside of it instead of allowing them to exist in their own way. So if you were just keeping all of the Muslims or all of the people of some other belief in a separate area, then maybe you could create the federalism we had before, right? I don't advise that. I don't think we should be ceding ground to mosques in the United States. But if we're just looking at the classic resolutions of these issues, well, that would be one way to do it. However, again, if you want to incorporate all these people and force them to live next to each other, you're going to need more and more power so the government can resolve all these conflicts that are unresolvable through normal social mechanisms because you removed the shared virtue, shared tradition, shared understanding. So by converting your nation to a multicultural nation, you get to accrue more power to yourself as a leader. And I'm sure most of these people would not announce this out loud, but they do recognize that incentive, even if they don't espouse it publicly to you. So, if the United States ever wants to return to being a republic, and it's a question of whether we can, and I don't say that with any excitement. I'm not happy about the fact that it might not be an option available to us. However, if it's an option available to us, and I think we should try to fight for it if it's available to us, then we have to recognize that we must scale down. Scale must be addressed. We cannot continue to ignore this problem. That means, first and foremost, of course, we must end immigration, legal and illegal, immediately. We need a long moratorium. I think I usually say 20 years, but people are yelling at me that needs to be even longer. Great, I'm with you. That's just like my ballpark number to throw it out there. We need a long-term moratorium. We need mass deportations. Anyone who shouldn't be here legally in any way, shape, or form must go home. 30, 40, 50 million people, I don't care. Every single one of them needs to leave this country. And even many who are here who have been naturalized need to be denaturalized if it's clear that they are not interested in assimilating. No more Ilhan Omars, no more of this, Dearborn or whatever, Minneapolis situation. If you're building mosques in the United States, if you're doing call to prayers in public in the United States, if you're talking about how you're actually there to represent Somalia in the United States, then you got to go. You need to be deported. You're a paperwork American. You're not a real American. You're not interested in becoming an American. You're never going to be an American. You're not even making an attempt to be an American, right? That's like the minimum we need. We need to scale down our interactions with foreign nations. We need to stop being reliant in countries like Israel or vice versa, Ukraine. We need to stop involving ourselves in places like that. We need to stop involving ourselves in these conflicts because A, we always end up importing the people who are involved in the conflict. B, it invites a lot of foreign influence, just like George Washington told us it would, that corrupts the nation and tears apart its identity. Then we need a generational Manhattan Project for building American identity. We have to do this. We have to create all of these different organizations that create social fabric. We need fraternal organizations. We need religious organizations. We need community organizations. We need the kind of associations that will bind us back together and help us share a culture again. And these are just the minimums, right? Like this is bare minimum. If we're serious about this, it has to be a project, something we pursue intentionally with great, great vigor. And if we don't do that, it's just never going to happen, right? Again, sadly, I'm a little doubtful that we are willing to dedicate ourselves to this project of restoration. Like, unfortunately, I think even the people claiming they want to return to the founding fathers are completely unwilling to do what it would take to do that kind of thing. But if they're serious, I want to lay out a path forward because there is a path. There are things we can understand about the nature of Republican government versus imperial government. And we can weigh those things and we can make decisions that intentionally move us back towards a Republican model. But only if we admit where we are. If we just stubbornly as conservatives are like, well, it's a republic, not a democracy. And we'll just follow the Constitution. No, like, yes, we should do those things, but also there's a lot more to this. And a lot of the things that you like, conservative, about America are tied to its empire. So you have to make peace with the fact that those things would be gone tomorrow if we want to do this. If we don't want to do this, you need to embrace empire, you need to embrace its requirements. But if not, then we need to set limitations on ourselves. A very difficult thing to do as a society, one that is often not successful if we look back at previous empires, be it the Roman or the British. So we have to also think about the consequences of attempting to scale back empire successfully. But if we are serious about being a republic, we have to change because we simply are not a republic now in no way, shape, or form. We do not meet that definition. So if we want to meet it again, we have to be willing to take the limitations on with the advantages. We can't just go around saying, I want everything and I don't understand why it's not working. All right. So the other thing I wanted to touch on real quickly was, of course, the drama with Marjorie Taylor Greene. Let me put that up on the screen real quick. Share that with you. All right. So if you're not familiar what has been going on with Marjorie Taylor Greene, she has been in an interesting spot right now, right? For the last few years, she's kind of been the AOC of the right, I think is kind of a fair way to say it. She's bombastic. She's got a certain level of charisma. She's plugged into the populist wing, especially of the Republican Party, of MAGA. These have kind of been things. Now, she's been far from perfect. Her voting record is far from perfect on this. I'm not trying to hold her up as the exemplar. I'm just saying that has been a place that she has been operating inside of for a while. So, what has happened over time, be it the mass immigration, the Epstein files, some of these other aspects, relationship with Israel, there's been a wedge between Marjorie Taylor Greene and the mainstream Republican Party, but she's also, because Trump's administration admittedly has been less than stellar on several things, especially things like the Epstein files. She has been increasingly at odds with the president. Now, I want to make it clear here. You need to be able to criticize Donald Trump, but you need to be able to do it in an effective manner, right? It's not that Donald Trump is beyond criticism. It's not that he is beyond, any kind of ultimate. You can look at what he's doing and break it down and explain what's wrong and ask for change. Ask him to redress your grievances, right? However, if you just go after Trump aggressively, you're going to get tossed out of the coalition. You're just going to be useless, right? I mean, there's many, many, many people who have done this. They've run directly into the Trump blender and got completely destroyed, right? So you might not like some of the things that Trump is doing, but ultimately it's a fool's errand to run in and make yourself completely irrelevant inside the Trump coalition by going at him directly. And unfortunately, this is more and more what Marjorie Taylor Greene is doing. Now, to be fair, again, Donald Trump has come after her. So it's not like it's a one-sided thing. Trump has not conducted himself the best towards her. She has not conducted herself the best towards him. There's plenty of blame to go around here. This is not me really taking sides one way or another on the past behavior. However, finally, we started to see Marjorie Taylor Greene start to spin out. And this is an unfortunate thing that happens when you start putting yourself on the other side of the coalition. And I know, here we go again. You enter into the friend enemy distinction mode, right? And you start making allowances for people who you otherwise would not ally with because they are suddenly with you on some aspect of your political battle. And it's advantageous for you to like realign politically, right? If Trump is coming at you directly, you need other allies. Trump is an incredibly powerful man. He has tons of influence. So if you end up at odds with this guy in a full knockdown drag out, you're going to need help, right? And so, unfortunately, the place that Marjorie Taylor Greene first looked was maybe guys like Thomas Massey or libertarians, other people who are kind of right wing, but have a problem with Trump. That was her first refuge, and that made some level of sense. Again, it's not that these critiques of Trump are entirely unfounded; they're not entirely baseless. It's just the way she was going about them was ultimately unwise, tactically. Not even about the moral situation, just tactically not a great idea. However, she then started showing up on these liberal outlets. I think she was on The View, she was on MSNBC, she's on these places, and she's talking about how Charlie Kirk being shot taught her that the whole country needed to come together. Now, I don't know about you, but when I saw just piles and piles of leftists getting together and celebrating the murder of Charlie Kirk, even mainstream leftists more or less justifying the murder of Charlie Kirk, even if they wouldn't celebrate it, what I saw there was not a call of unity from the left. What I saw was a call for murder. And by the way, they're still there. In fact, again, I don't know what's going on with the National Guardsmen. I don't have the information at the moment, but we could be seeing more left-wing terror right now. I don't know. Again, I'm not attributing it. I don't know. However, that possibility still exists out there. And the reaction from Marjorie Taylor Greene was, I want to go out and get on these leftist shows and like show them I'm one of the good ones. And that's always like, whether you're David French doing this or you're Marjorie Taylor Greene doing this, yeah, they're doing it for different reasons. They're doing it from even different parts of the political spectrum, but they end up in the same place, right? There's this gradient that you suddenly follow the minute you kind of go down this path. And unfortunately, Marjorie Taylor Greene went down it pretty hard. So Trump came at her very hard, made it clear that he was going to primary her. And Marjorie Taylor Greene, like most Republicans, knows that going toe-to-toe with Donald Trump is just a huge mistake at the end of the day. And she decided she was just going to back out of politics. She said, look, I'm not going to be able to achieve the things that I want. I'm going to step away, do my own thing. We are not going to make progress. And I have too many principles to continue to keep doing this. It takes a toll on me personally, my family and everything. So I'm just going to step away. Now, you'll see Mike Cernovich here. And Cernovich has been a guy who's defended Marjorie Taylor Greene on a lot of issues. Not always the biggest fan of Trump's current agenda, his current arc. Also, Cernovich definitely not a fan of kind of the bowing and scraping thing that we're seeing a lot of times when it comes to certain Republicans and our relationship with Israel. So he has been somebody who has been vocally, a defender of Marjorie Taylor Greene. And he said, look, you need to finish out your term. The people voted for you. They deserve to get your full term as a representative of this country. It's not like you're there forever. It's 4 years. So just serve out the term that you were elected to do. And she just blew up on him. And first she says, "Oh, I haven't suffered enough for you while you post behind a screen all day." Now, fair enough. Mike Cernovich, what I'm doing right now, we're not breaking rocks, right? Like, this is not the hardest thing in the world to do. It's quite a privilege to have this position. But to be clear, neither is Marjorie Taylor Greene, right? Like, she sits around talking to people, taking meetings, voting, going to cocktail parties, raising money. It's not exactly like she's just living the hardest life. And she's also posting behind a screen most of the day. So her acting like she's bearing this incredible burden that Cernovich is not, that's just deeply, deeply inauthentic. Then she says, "Do I have to stay until I'm assassinated like our friend Charlie Kirk?" So this is bad for a couple of reasons. First, she's admitting that she is susceptible to the political terrorism. Now, I get it. Watching Charlie Kirk get shot was jarring. I mean, he's not even a politician like she is. He's a political commentator like me. I mean, much higher stature than I was, than I am. But he's still ultimately not even an elected official. So I get it shaking to your core, and everyone should be taking precautions, and everyone should take the violence seriously. But what that should do from a congressional representative, someone who styles herself as a fighter, that should inspire you to fight harder, right? That should say, I am not going to be cowed by this violence. I will not be capitulating to terrorism. You will not drive me out of the public eye. You will not control my positions. You're not going to get me to go grovel to MSNBC and The View because you shot a Republican. Like, that's giving the left every single thing they want. Please don't hurt me. Please don't hurt me. Can't we all just get along? And by that, I mean, please stop shooting people who have my beliefs because I'm scared of you. That's all she's saying here. And this is a terrible message. This is a message of fear. This is a message of cowardice. This is a message of capitulation. And as somebody who is somewhat sympathetic to the things that Marjorie Taylor Greene has been pressing Trump on, much like Mike Cernovich, the fact that she would turn around and scream at Cernovich and reveal, frankly, this level of cowardice is ugly. She says, "Will it be good enough for you then?" I guess I'll just read the profanity since it is the profanity of a congresswoman. Shit posting on the internet all day isn't fighting. Get off your ass and run for Congress. Again, fair enough, but like, Greene is leaving. She's leaving Congress. And it's not like she was fighting in a physical sense. She's not even really writing much legislation at the end of the day. I mean, I guess she wrote it and most of it didn't get passed. Like, it's not like she's in a trench somewhere. She's taking meetings. She's dictating to assistants. It's not exactly like she's in World War I fought harder than anyone in the real arena, not social media. Put down your little pebbles and put your money where your mouth is. Well, obviously, she does think that social media makes a lot of difference because she's on it arguing constantly. And of course, we all know, look, I get it. Twitter isn't real life, but also it's kind of real life. Like, whether you like it or not, the political class in the United States, journalists, politicians, media figures, celebrities, they're all addicted to the same site, and that site is Twitter. Maybe that's a disaster. It probably is. We're probably going to have people in different civilizations look back at this moment in our history and say, what in the world were these people thinking? They were insane, right? In the same way that, like, everyone being incredibly decadent in Versailles probably looks silly today. However, that is the reality, and what matters, what happens in Twitter does matter. And whether you like it or not, Cernovich is a gifted Twitter poster with a lot of influence who moves the needle on the regular basis. He gets the attention of the presidential administration. They listen. Trust me. Like, this is a guy who wields a surprising amount of power from a Twitter account. So Greene pretending like that just doesn't happen, maybe that makes her feel better. I get it. Maybe it's not even a way you want the country to be run, but it is true. So here we are. All right. So then Greene follows up, and this is where things really come off the rails, right? That is not great. That's ugly, especially the showing the cowardice for the Charlie Kirk assassination. But this is where she really spins out. She responds here again and says, typical of Republican men telling a woman to shut up and get back in the kitchen and fix me something to eat. F you in the sweetest, most southern draw I can enunciate. I've been trying to tell you, men, that our kitchen pantry is empty with spider webs. Our house has been ransacked. The windows and doors are broken, busted. You get the idea. It's men. You're bad. You've been, I'm a woman, but I know how to fix this. You men are the problem. Republican men are the issue. The GOP is the issue, right? And this just kind of reveals a pure, like, leftist feminist hatred for men. I don't really know else how to describe it. When she crashes out against not just men, but Republican men, many of which who have been her biggest supporters. It's not like I don't think there are, it's not that I don't know that there are tons of conservative men who are big fans of Marjorie Taylor Greene, who have promoted her, who have elevated her, who have encouraged her, who have sung her praises. I mean, I'm sure there are some people being mean to her online for being a woman. It happens to everyone. I certainly have people being mean to me online. And I'm sure as a woman, she even ends up with more of it, and especially someone in a higher profile being in the position she does. But this does not allow her to go after Republican men. I mean, who does she think votes for her? Look at the demographics. Who keeps someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene in office, right? And it becomes impossible not to recognize that along with Marjorie Taylor Greene, we recently had a kind of political burnout, a complete blow up from Dinesh D'Souza. And who did Dinesh D'Souza attack when he spun out? Well, white people. Hey, whitey, you're not as good as the H-1B people. They're going to show you how to do things. They're going to be the real successful people. They're going to be the one that succeed in your society, not you, white boy. So interesting because, we have this conservative civil war going on, right? And surprisingly, even though we have these two sides, that Dinesh D'Souza and Marjorie Taylor Greene are very on these two different sides, right? Very different sides. Marjorie Taylor Greene pushing the America First idea, Dinesh kind of going back to establishment conservatism. Even though you have these two sides, they both, when they crash out, which is interesting, right? We have two distinct sides at war with each other, crashing out with their base. And when they crash out, who do they attack? Well, it's either men, white people, or white men. Right? Like that's the Venn diagram we have here. When these guys crash out, when Dinesh or Marjorie Taylor Greene crash out, do they attack leftists? Do they attack progressives? Do they go after, I don't know, some other race, some other gender? No, it's all white men. So when it's time to attack, even though MTG is on one side and Dinesh is on the other, both of them attack the same people, the same types of people, the voter base of the Republican Party. Now, it's bad enough. I mean, Dinesh has spent decades. He wrote The End of Racism. He's tried to kind of position himself as this MLK colorblind representative inside the Republican Party, inside the conservative apparatus. It's bad enough that he crashed out and started attacking white people. Very strange, right? Kind of blows up the colorblind meritocracy, whole thing he's been pushing for a very long time. But Marjorie Taylor Greene is supposed to be part of this like nationalist, America First, new conservative movement, new right movement, populist through and through, right? And what does she do? She also attacks the Republican voter base. So whether you're a populist or an establishment guy, America First or a wider geopolitical American empire guy, at the end of the day, when it's time to spin out, when it's time to crash out, who do you go after? The main Republican voting demographic. White people, men, white men, like these are the people you attack. I think that says a lot. Even if someone in Marjorie Taylor Greene's position, who's supposed to represent her positions, even when she crashes out, who does she go after? The people that left-wing media has programmed her to go after. When Dinesh crashes out, who does he go after? The people progressive media tells him it's okay to go after. Why? It's kind of built in, right? It's what is approved. And I think there's kind of a revealed position, a revealed preference that shows itself under stress. And so it's just been a terrible day for her to come out and behave in that manner because I think it's gross. I think it betrays her voters. I think it's stabbing a lot of people in the back. And for those that agreed with her on some of her criticisms of Trump, now they look stupid for backing her. Their positions are injured by being represented by someone like this and having put their faith in her. The credibility of people who ultimately championed any questioning she was doing of Donald Trump suddenly collapses because she's emotionally incontinent and unable to represent their interests in a real responsible way, and everybody kind of loses because now not only do we have betrayal after betrayal from people who are ostensibly conservative, but with every one of these betrayals, they undermine the ability to course correct anything that might be going on incorrectly with the Trump administration. They have basically ripped out the credibility of the very thing they want to provide, which is a substantive critique. In theory, a lot of people have pointed out, and it's hard to argue with MTG's behavior here, that ultimately these people were never for Trump, or at least they hadn't been for Trump for a long time, and they defined themselves in opposition to MAGA, even while kind of staying inside the coalition nominally in some way or another. And, I prefer not to believe that, but when MTG is behaving this way and, attacking people in this manner, it's kind of hard to pretend that's not a substantive critique of what's happening here. So all that to say, kind of crazy news day. But we're probably going to go ahead and wrap this up. I don't see a lot of questions from the people here, so we'll probably just go ahead and end things. I do want to say that before I head on or out for the next 2 days to enjoy the holiday season, that I was just on John Doyle's show, a new colleague at The Blaze. Great guy, great show. I was on there talking about Thanksgiving, so if you want to check that out, you can. You should definitely go over and give John some support. But I just like to say that I'm thankful for you guys. Just an amazing ride this has been. Still blown away every day that I get to do this, coming from where I came from, doing what I was doing previously. The fact that I get to enjoy speaking with you guys and sharing my thoughts on the events, and hopefully bringing some education and some political theory to otherwise what would be just kind of back and forth in the political sphere. I'm just incredibly grateful to get to do that. I am grateful for The Blaze allowing me to do that. I'm grateful for you guys for making it possible. Many of you supporting me since the very beginning. And of course, I am thankful to live in this amazing country, blessed by the one and only God, and the Creator, the Christian God. And if you are not enjoying your Thanksgiving while honoring Christ our King, I encourage you to find him and do so, because that is what has made our country great. And that is one of the things that defines our people. And I will be thankful ultimately that we can continue to celebrate such an amazing group, such an amazing people moving into the future. So thank you so much for watching, guys. If it's your first time on YouTube, you know what to do. Subscribe, click the bell, notifications, so you know that we're going live. If you want to get these broadcasts as podcasts, you need to subscribe to the Auron MacIntyre Show on your favorite podcast platform. If you do leave a rating or review, it helps with the algorithm magic. Keep doing that, guys. The podcast keeps growing, and it's amazing every day. Thank you so much for watching. Enjoy your Thanksgiving. And as always, I will talk to you next time.